Hello everyone, it's Kari, and today I'm back to share with you a fun mixed media project. This time we're going to be using this brand new stamp set from Missing Stamps. This is so cute. It's got a couple of different mugs and hearts. It says love is in the air and it smells like coffee. And I thought I'd pair it today with the Magnolia Sympathy stamp set, which I absolutely adore. And then I'm going to use this die right here, but I'm using the center of it, and I always save those center pieces when I cut this out. And today that's going to come in really handy because we're going to use a lot of those up. I have here some watercolor paper. I have the rough side on the back, and I'm going to be using the smooth side today. And to get started, we're going to just prep this with an anti-static powder tool, and then we're going to stamp a couple of those magnolias on the background. So there's a couple different sizes here, and I'm going to take both of them and use some Versamark ink to stamp those on the background, and then use some white embossing powder to heat emboss those images. So what I like to do is stamp a couple down and then add the white embossing powder over that so I know where they are, and then I'll stamp a couple more down and then heat emboss them all at once. It just seems to go easier and faster. The reason I'm not heat embossing this whole background at once is because I'm worried that I might flake some of that powder off using the magnet to hold it down. So that's why I do a few at a time, usually 4 or 6 at a time. And that way I can make sure a good portion of them are already heat set before I set it back down on the MISTI, turn it around the other direction. And that way I can still use my magnet without worrying about messing it up. So that there is a method to my madness, or madness to my method, I don't know. And now I'll go ahead and finish the rest of this here, the other side, and heat emboss all of that. And then we're ready for a little bit of fun. So you can see I'm heat embossing that, and I will finish this off screen. There we go. So there's our panel. Now it's time for a little bit of mixed media. I haven't used these color bursts in quite a while. These are Ken Oliver color bursts, and they're so pretty, but also very pigmented. So you only need a tiny, tiny bit. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit on my watercolor paper here. I have sprayed it with water, and I just want to put a little bit on and then spray it a little bit more. Now this one here is alizarin crimson, so it's actually red, but I want it to be pink. So I'm going to add a lot of water to this to make sure I can get a lighter color. And then I'll use a flat paintbrush to kind of spread that out and help it go a little bit further. I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow here as well, mostly to the top portion, because I want it to have a different variation and change in color. And you'll see that it's really going to turn out so fun with some good variation. Now I will take some extra of that paint that we've created, and I will drop some of it into each of the flowers. So we're going to get a darker look in each of these flowers when it dries, and it's really going to leave us a beautiful spring background. So I'm just going to kind of help some of this along, squirt it a little more with water, and then we'll set this all aside to dry. Of course, I wanted to use up some of that extra paint that was on my background, so I used another piece of watercolor paper and picked that up and had a little fun there, and I'll use that for another project or to use as a die cut some other time. Now I'm going to set all of that aside to dry as we work on our little panel here with the coffee cup. I like to call it a hot cocoa cup. I don't drink coffee, but I do love the smell of it, which is why I love this sentiment that says love is in the air and it smells like coffee. I think that's so fun. And so I'm going to use this one with the heart on it, this coffee mug with the heart on it, and I'll stamp it down with some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and then I'm also going to heat emboss that using some clear embossing powder. And that's going to really help when we color this up with a little bit of watercolor as well. Now this is not watercolor paper that I'm using, so I'm just going to use the smallest amount of water when I use some color on this, and you'll see in just a minute. Let me heat set this a little bit. There we go. And now it's ready to add a little bit of color. So I could have saved some of that watercolor that we created with the color bursts, but I didn't think that I was going to use that anymore. So I went ahead and cleaned all of that up. So instead I'm going to take some picked raspberry and I'll use it to color around the edges of this die cut. And then I'm also going to put a little bit on an acrylic block, add some water, and just paint a little bit on with a paintbrush. So I have a little water to the left here, and I'm just painting the smallest amount on. I'm trying not to use very much water at all because, like I said, this is not watercolor paper that I had cut this with. It's just regular cardstock. So we have that ready to go now, and our background is nearly dry, and look how pretty the colors are coming out. We had a little bit seep over the edge there, but that's okay. We're going to cover that a little with our sentiment, and it's almost dry, but not quite. So I'm going to set that aside while I work on our sentiment. And for this, I'm going to stamp this on some vellum. Again, I'm using an anti-static powder tool for the vellum because I want to stamp this in black ink and then heat set it with clear embossing powder once again. Now, vellum is notorious for smearing ink, which is why I definitely want to heat set it with some embossing powder. That'll make sure that I never smear the sentiment. And when you're heat embossing on vellum, you want to just put the heat on for a little second and then take it off and then add it a little bit more. That way you don't warp your vellum. So that's what I did, and I made sure to heat up my heat tool for a good 30 seconds. Now you can see that this has dried and it's warped just a little bit, but I just ran it through my die cutting machine without any dies, just through the cutting plates, and it flattened it out a little bit for me. So that's a neat trick. Now I'm going to take some finger daubers here, and I'm going to add this beautiful Leafy stencil. I think this is called Leafy Vine Stencil. I will link it below. And I'm going to add a couple of colors of Distress Oxides with those. I want it to be the same color, very similar to the background. So I decided the Saltwater Taffy was a better match than the orange one that I had there earlier. And then I'm also going to do some beautiful picked raspberry on the bottom portion. So you can see that we have a couple variations in that color. I love the way that it dried. And to add this to the top just really adds a little extra something. It makes it so pretty and it feels just rich and beautiful. So I like that. Now you could also use Distress ink if you wanted to. The Distress Oxide were the ones I had in these colors because I don't have all the colors of all of the ones. I know. I do have full set syndrome, but I don't have the full set yet. So here's what it's going to look like, and I'm going to take that vellum and just wrap it around the edges, and I'll use some washi tape to secure that down to the back. And this is a neat trick because sometimes you can see the adhesive through the vellum, and I didn't want that, but this was popping up just a little too much for me still. So I'm going to untape that and add just a little bit of liquid adhesive behind the words, just tiny, tiny dots, because I'm hoping you won't be able to see it on the opposite side when it dries. So I'll add those dots and then retape that and add an acrylic block over the top for that to dry. Now remember all those extra die cuts I had? Well, I'm going to use them here. I'm going to build these up to make our focal point elevated just a little bit. And this is really superior to using foam tape, I think, because it does make the entire thing raise up. It won't indent when you mail it, so it just offers a lot of support and creates kind of an embellishment. So now I'll add that entire thing to the front there, and we can also add this to our card base. So I'll go ahead and add quite a bit of glue because this is watercolor paper, so it is thicker. So I added extra glue, and I'm going to just tack that down a little bit with all the acrylic blocks I could find. Now I want the center to be just a little bit sparkly, but not too sparkly. Oh my. Okay, I had to take a break there for a minute. My husband just came in and scared me. So this is sprinkled sugar stickles, not my normal Stardust stickles, which is very, very glittery, but the sprinkled sugar stickles just has a tiny bit of glitter and it dries a little bit sparkly and glossy. So that's what I used, and that will finish up our card for today. I hope you enjoyed this mixed media project. I also think it would look so pretty with the coffee bean stencil in the background instead of those leafy vines. So you could use whatever you have, but a really fun project, and I really enjoyed making it. I'll be back real soon with more card making inspiration and surprises, and I hope you have a really crafty day. Bye-bye.